Hi, this is Lacey,
And Robin.
and we're here today to just talk about my belly warmer that I've got on. So we wanted to also talk about
Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions.
Whee! Anything you want to say about this before we get into the topic?
Nope.
Really nothing.
Nope.
How do you feel when you think about Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions?
Bored.
Yeah, same. I generally feel bored, but also sometimes I want to pull my hair out. This is like an important foundational topic, right? Because otherwise people start talking about shit, and you're like, you don't even know what Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are. I can't have any conversation with you. You obviously haven't spent more than 5 minutes researching or reading about this topic. So it's important that you know.
You'd rather talk about your belly warmer.
Yeah, my belly warmer would be much more interesting right now. But we're going to talk about this because we think it's important that you know about it. So let's see. And this is the first time that we've got this nice little Prezi situation going on. So Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, what is it? So the Greenhouse Gas Protocol has come up with a convenient way to categorize and think about a company's contribution to global warming and climate change. Mm-hmm. And the way that they've done that is they've come up with a really riveting field of study called carbon accounting. Woohoo! But what that means is, so there's 3 scopes of emissions. Scope 1 and 2, as you can see with this nice chart here, is anything that happens in production. So we wanted to start with this before we go into what falls into each scope. But basically, Scope 1 and 2 are things that like you would imagine are happening right around production. And then Scope 3 handles everything. You look so excited. Upstream and downstream. That's basically it. Great. So then let's talk about what's in Scope 1. So what's one example of something in Scope 1? It's
you burning stuff.
Yeah. So like the joke I like to make, this is a fun carbon accounting joke, is that if I were to like set fire to my dumpster in my backyard, mm-hmm. I would have Scope 1 emissions.
Yes.
I think that's true, but basically it's something that you're burning directly on your property, something that you own.
Not necessarily on your property. You could also be driving on the highway, right?
Right.
You're burning fossil fuels.
Exactly. So, okay, let's go into the definition. So, Scope 1 emissions are from sources controlled or owned by an organization or an individual. So some examples of that are on-site fuel combustion. So if a company owns like a factory or hello, or can we even put this on the internet?
No way.
If a company put no way, not bad.
Yes. Also, we should be looking into the camera. It's hard.
So basically, if a company has a factory, they would have Scope 1 emissions. So they're often like generating the power that's used in their manufacturing facility to produce stuff. Mm-hmm. Or if a company has a company fleet, right? So they're burning fuel in their owned asset. So this is real, and this is important actually because companies are really only obligated if they disclose and they offset. They could claim that they're carbon neutral or that they've offset their emissions if they've only offset Scope 1. Unless you're a power generation facility, you don't have that many Scope 1 emissions. It's a very small number, right?
Maybe if you're a shipping company or if you're a
logistics company would have a lot of Scope 1 emissions.
Yeah.
Which we'll go through that later. We'll have a guess which company this is based on their emissions. A fun game in our household.
A fun carbon accounting game.
Yeah, exactly. We like to keep it fun, But anyway, so it's really important because like not a lot of companies have Scope 1 and 2 emissions, especially the ones that are claiming that they're carbon neutral. Scope 2. So scope 2 emissions are emissions from a company's consumption of electricity, steam, heating, cooling. So here, thank you. This is a grocery aisle with a refrigerator. So like a Sainsbury that has a lot of cooling demand, a data center, whatever. But any company that has offices, all of the electricity used in that company's operations would be in scope 2. So this is, it's not small. Most companies are using electricity, but it's still not going to be lion's share of emissions. Great. So that leaves us with scope 3. So it's basically everything else is scope 3 emissions. So there are 15 different categories in the GHG protocol. They're usually broken into upstream and downstream activities. And this is basically then the rest of the value chain of a company. So for a consulting company, all of business travel would fall into this category. So all of the flights that consultants take would be in scope 3. Again, it's not, scope 3 is not something that companies often quantify very well. They likely aren't including it in their claims to be carbon neutral. And there's a lot of stuff in here. What else would be in scope 3? What comes to mind for you?
For example, the fuel that Shell sells to consumers, and that basically the emissions from burning that fuel be in scope 3.
For Shell.
Or Unilever mentioned if people take hot showers with their product while using their shampoo.
Yeah.
Like that's scope 3 emissions.
But this would also be end of life for like for any of Unilever's products, Apple's products, all of the end of life treatment would fall in this category as well. So that would be in the scope 1 emissions of the customer using it. If they get rid of it in a facility owned by them. Otherwise, I guess it would be the waste company that had scope 1 emissions.
The landfill owner.
The landfill owner.
Yeah.
So you can see how this is, it's interesting. It also sets us up for some confusion. It's not MECE. Like emissions can show up multiple times across the landscape in scope 1. Somebody's scope 1, somebody else's scope 2, somebody else's scope 3. And what happens is that the industries that are already carbon intensive are the ones that look bad. They look like they have a lot of scope 1 and 2 emissions because they do. They're basically doing, like, filling all of that duty in the economy, but the people who are generating or creating the emission, hi Nuka, aren't really accountable to offset them, calculate them, that sort of thing. And that's the end. Anything else?
Nope.